Sagana Lalita Shivishakanvitamscha Madeka Bandomat Sangin Maguro Man Mahadana Man Nistarakamat Bhagya Marananda Namostute. Okay, the last part of Chichiketu's story. He gets cursed by Mother Parvati. We'll hear about that. We'll hear about his response to her curse. And then the last part of the chapter is Lord Shiva glorifying Vaishnavas in their exalted nature. And that closes out the pastime of Chittiketu, which, as we should keep in mind, is intended as an answer to the question how Bhakti was able to manifest in Vitrusura, who was a demon, firmly situated in Rajagun Tamagun in terms of his psychophysical karmic inheritance, and still he exhibited such exalted devotion. So how is that possible? And so the story of Chittiketu is meant as an answer to that question, demonstrating that devotion is not dependent upon material exaltedness or deprivation. It can manifest anywhere, provided one gets sadhu sangha. Okay, so let's hear the rest of the story. We're going to try to do up to verse 17 today, just telling the story. Srila Shukadeva Goswami said, after offering obeisances to the direction from which Ananta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, had disappeared, Chittiketu began traveling in outer space as the head of the Vidyadharas, being praised by great sages and saints and by the inhabitants of Siddhaloka and Charanaloka. Chittiketu, the most powerful mystic yogi, wandered about enjoying life for millions of years. With bodily strength and senses free from deterioration, he traveled within the valleys of Sumeru mountain, which is a place of perfection for various kinds of mystic power. In those valleys, he enjoyed life with the women of Vidyadhara Loka by chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Hari. The comment here of Prabhupada and Sri Vishwanath is that despite material opulences, he was not distracted from bhajan, which is a demonstration of the exalted nature of his bhakti. Generally, the conditioned souls, we do get distracted by material opulences. The onslaught of happiness and the onslaught of distress, Prabhupada used this term in the Gita. The onslaught of distress and how that distracts is apparent to us. But the onslaught of happiness and how that distracts is not always so apparent. In any case, only those who are firmly situated in bhakti can be immune to the dualities of nature in the form of great happiness, material happiness, or material distress. So that is a comment of our acharyas here. Even though he was enjoying with the women and all of that, he was not distracted from bhajan. Next verses. One time while Chittiketu was traveling in outer space on a brilliantly effulgent airplane given to him by Lord Vishnu, he saw Lord Shiva surrounded by siddhas and charanas. Lord Shiva was sitting in an assembly of great saintly persons and embracing Parvati on his lap with his arm. Chittiketu laughed loudly and spoke within the hearing of Parvati. The only comment to come here, if I recall, is that the Supreme Lord was himself feeling separation from Chittiketu. So he made an arrangement by which he can bring Chittiketu back to him. And the arrangement, of course, as the unfolding of the story goes, is he will be cursed to become a demon, Vitrusura. And then in the life of Vitrusura, he will be killed, of course, by Indra. And then after that, he'll be brought back to Godhead. So this whole his whole scene, Shiva, now the scene is quite interesting. Shiva surrounded by like siddhas and charanas. The image is sort of like they were like Brahmavadis, so situated in, Vedic edicts. Probably a good amount of them are like renunciates even. And Lord Shiva is sitting there surrounded by them, and his wife is on his lap and he's embracing her. And I guess public displays of affection were not the norm in the Vedic culture for followers of Brahmavadis. So this was an atypical scene, which caused Tritaketu to laugh loudly. And he's going to make some comments about that. But this whole situation, it seems, was orchestrated by Krishna to bring his devotee back to him. That is a comment that Prabhupada and Sri Vishwanath offered to this particular verse. So when one has great devotion to God, especially on the level of Sadhya Bhakti. Sadhya Bhakti means bhava and prema. So the Lord has his tactics for increasing that bhava, increasing that prema. And a lot of those tactics often do evolve as far as the scenes play out. They evolve or involve this life reversals as far as what's happening empirically. Some reversal, some failure in life, some deprivation is at hand in order to cause the augmentation of the prema. If you think like bhava, for example, the word for bhava, one of the words for bhava is prema ankura. Ankura means like the seed or the bulb. And the seeds, they often, not often, all seeds, they are placed inside the dirt. And it is in that darkness that the seed is able to actually sprout and flower into whatever fruit it is. So often it is seen in Krishna's dealings with his devotees that he creates a situation of deprivation, which is like darkness. And in that darkness, then the love is able to really exalt itself, really sprout in the most beautiful way. So although the tendency is to think of success, even devotional success, the tendency is to think of it in terms of so many books distributed, so many people converted, so many places of prasadam, so many big festivals attended, and so on. This is the general mentality to think how one thinks of success, materially speaking, of course, but even in devotional circles, we tend to think of success in this way. And we may not always have the full appreciation that we're coming closer to success when we're in a situation of deprivation. And Krishna is forcing that in order for us to actually grow our love, so to speak. Just like when you hear about devotees' failings, which comes up periodically in the course of being a part of a devotional community, you'll hear about some devotee who's, was once celebrated and appreciated for, the material things. He gives a good class, he's charismatic, she is a great cook. They've done so many hours of service, like tirelessly. And you'll hear like these exalted lordans, but now they've been caught doing illicit sex, and everyone's like, oh, how horrible, how horrible. But maybe why horrible? Why does it have to be horrible? Maybe this is glorious, actually, that in the context of his success, those successes were acting as a sort of cocoon, like a calcified cocoon, out of which the butterfly wasn't able to emerge. It's like trapped, just like this image is given. We've heard it in the first chapter, the 6th canto, where in relationship to the conditioned souls, how they, by their fruitive activities, they create a cocoon which entraps them and in which they die. This image is given in like a silkworm. I don't know much about silkworms, but the imagery in the Bhagavatam is a silkworm. He creates a cocoon around himself, and apparently, I guess in that cocoon he dies. Anyway, I don't know how true that is. Scientifically, we can look it up. The Bhagavatam gives an image like this. So the conditioned souls, they create a cocoon of fruitive activities in which they die, and of course take rebirth. So in this way, our successes can be like a cocoon that's disallowing for greater devotion to emerge. And so Krishna creates a situation of deprivation that cracks the cocoon, and out of which the butterfly can then emerge, a greater devotion, a following upward. So, yeah, normal devotees will think of success in terms of the external criteria, which we can see. Oh, there's so many books. Oh, so many people influenced. And certainly that is success on one level. It cannot be denied. But there are deeper levels of success, like the attainment of the sadhya of Krishna Bhakti. And for that attainment, that is out of our hands, and it requires greater grace. And the way that grace manifests itself, who knows? But at least from the stories of the Bhagavad, it looks like grace manifests itself often in a way that it creates a circumstance of failure, or at least apparent failure. And in that way, greater devotion is able to emerge. So this is Prabhupada's comment on Sri Vishwanath on this particular verse. Why he would laugh at this scene and so on. Oh, Krishna is inspiring that. Next verses, Tritaketu said, so he's responding to the scene here. Lord Shiva, the spiritual master of the general populace, is the best of all living entities who have accepted material bodies. He enunciates a system of religion. Yet how wonderful it is that he is embracing his wife Parvati in the midst of an assembly of great saintly persons. Next verse. Lord Shiva, whose hair is matted on his head, has certainly undergone great austerities and penances. Indeed, he is the president in the assembly of strict followers of Vedic principles, Brahmavadina. Nonetheless, he is seated with his wife on his lap in the midst of saintly persons and is embracing her as if he were a shameless, ordinary human being. So Prabhupada's comment here is that this is not like the envy that Daksha had for Shiva. Daksha also criticized Shiva, and that was due to envy. He thought Shiva, as Prabhupada says, insignificant. But Tritaketu is offering a critique here, but his critique is not informed by envy. It's informed by wonder, like, wow, astonishment. That is what's actually informing his critique. It's not even really a critique, it's really a glorification, because it's wonder, it's astonishment. And what is the astonishment? Despite being so exalted, his exalted nature is hidden within what appears to be transgressions of Vedic etiquette. Just as Krishna Lila, particularly his Shringar Lila, his romantic Lila, it is the most exalted thing in the world. Thing is not the right word. The most exalted reality is the romantic love of Braj, and yet it's hidden in what appears to be irreligious affairs. Paramour love, especially for Vedic culture, paramour love is just like out of the question. So speaking about paramour love in the context of 2022 doesn't have the same impact because people are already on dating apps and so on. So that's just like standard. But for Vedic culture, that's, extremely religious, so much so that if a woman would go out, and no one knew where she was, then she was considered basically untouchable after that. She would come back home, nope, gotta get out of the house, can't be here, you're contaminated, just because no one knew where she was at for a few hours of the day or a few hours of the nighttime, no one knew where she was at. Nope. That's how rigid the culture was that we hear about. And yet the gopis are kind of in their pastime, at least boldly leaving their husbands and children and responsibilities to go be with Krishna. So the most exalted thing there, Shringar Rasa, is hidden and what appears to be a transgression of Vedic edicts. That is how, in other words, their love is hidden in plain sight. It's hidden so well that if anyone looks upon it with ordinary eyes, they will criticize it. That is how well hidden it is. And so without the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and Vaishnavas in general, explaining the exalted nature of this paramour love, then no one would know it. In fact, even before the Gaudiyas, and even to this day, even Vaishnavas, they have a very difficult time explaining Krishna Lila in terms of its paramour exaltedness. They don't accept. That's why Jiva Goswami giving a big commentary saying, actually, Krishna's married with the gopis, because people are very sensitive about this. How could they transgress moral edicts? Everyone's trapped by Vaidhi Bhakti. They're trapped, so they can't appreciate. That's how well hidden Krishna Lila is. It is hidden in plain sight. Everyone can see it. They will criticize because they have ordinary eyes. So in a similar way, Lord Shiva's glories is hidden also in plain sight. So this is the astonishment that Tritaketu is trying to express. So it's not envy like Daksha, it's astonishment. How he's so exalted, and he's giving you some list here of his exalted qualities, and yet he appears to be embattled, entrenched by shameless activities like ordinary persons. And so this is his astonishment and his critique. Okay, next verse. Ordinary conditioned persons generally embrace their wives and enjoy their company in solitary places. Correct. How wonderful it is that Lord Mahadeva, although a great master of austerity, is embracing his wife openly in the midst of an assembly of great saints. So Prabhupada comments, the word Mahavratadhara indicates a brahmachari who has never fallen down. So Lord Shiva is counted among the best of yogis, yet he embraced his wife in the midst of great saintly persons. So the contrast is stark. Ordinary conditioned souls, they don't perform heavy austerities. And when they want to embrace their wives, they do it in private. Whereas here, this person is Mahavratadhara. He's doing most heavy austerities as suitable for a leader of mystics or yogis. And he's embracing his wife in open, in public. How is this? So he's making this interesting contrast there, or juxtaposition between ordinary conditioned souls and Lord Shiva. Whereas the ordinary conditioned souls, they have I wouldn't call it duplicity, but they don't do heavy vratas necessarily. Of course, Vedic culture, they would do something. And they embrace their wives in private. Whereas Lord Shiva is so exalted, doing so many heavy vratas, as expected of a leader of yogis, and he's embracing in public. So who can understand these great personalities? So he's laughing. Now, Tritaketu is laughing while he's saying this. And again, it's astonishment. So this is his comment. So this is the response. So Sri Shukadeva continues. My dear king, after hearing Tritaketu's statement, Lord Shiva, the most powerful personality whose knowledge is fathomless, simply smiled and remained silent, and all the members of the assembly followed the Lord by not saying anything. So here in this verse, he is said to have just smiled. That was his response to the astonishment-informed criticism of Tritaketu. And the reason for this, it says, because his knowledge was fathomless. He can understand the heart of Tritaketu, that it was in fact informed by astonishment and not envy. He could also understand that, and this is Prabhupada's comment, that Tritaketu was concerned that although you're a great personality and therefore even apparent transgressions of Vedic edicts can't contaminate you, just in the same way that fire, whatever is placed in fire is consumed by fire, purified by fire and consumed by fire. So in the same way, whatever powerful persons do, those, even when they appear to be transgressions, those transgressions cannot affect them. This is Shukadeva Goswami's comment also to explain Krishna's Ras Leela when Parikshit Maharaj is asking the question, how is it possible for Krishna to transgress Vedic edicts and, sport with other men's wives? To which Shukadeva Goswami says, whatever Ishwaras do, it doesn't affect them because they are the controllers of the whole universe. They're just like fire that consumes everything. And therefore they're not to be imitated. Their activities are not to be imitated. He goes on to say, Shukadeva Goswami in this passage, that whenever you see I should have pulled the verse up. Anyway, he goes on to say that when you, whatever words say, these great persons, whatever they say, that is beneficial for everyone. And what they do is beneficial when it's aligned with what they say. So if you are an intelligent person, you will only follow the example of these great souls that you will follow that example of these great souls that align with their words. Because what they say is always beneficial for the conditioned soul. But what they do, because of their exalted nature, may not be always beneficial. So if you're going to follow their example, you follow the example that is aligned with their words. Or in other words, aligned with Shastra Vidhi. So that is how you are to apply when looking at the example of these Ishwaras, these great personalities who can transgress even, ordinary Vedic principles because they've already transcended them. And transcendence may often look like a transgression for those who are still bound by those edicts. So Tritaketu accepts that this is the position of a person like Lord Shiva. Yet, if people see his example, they may either imitate that. Prabhupada quotes 321 Bhagavad Gita. Yayara chariti shreshtas tatari bhattarojanas sayat pramanam kurute lokasta anuvartate. Sayat pramana kurute. They will take that as pramana for what they should be doing, and they will imitate and be destroyed. Or else they will criticize and say, what is this nonsense, et cetera, et cetera. And the result of their criticism is they'll be finished. And the result of their imitation is also they'll be finished. So in this way, Tritaketu is concerned about that. This is Prabhupada's comment. And therefore, he's making this comment out of this concern for the general populace who will either criticize Shiva and be destroyed or either imitate him and be destroyed. And this way the living entities would be lost. So Lord Shiva, understanding the deep intention of Tritaketu, simply smiled. And the followers of Shiva, the Vidyadharas, the Charadas, the Siddhas who are surrounding him, they could understand Lord Shiva's mind. So they also simply smiled. And, like approval. Okay, so next verse. Parvati didn't like it though, so she's got something to say about this. Not knowing the prowess of Lord Shiva and Parvati, Tritaketu strongly criticized them. His statements were not at all pleasing, and therefore the goddess Parvati, being very angry, spoke as follows to Tritaketu, who thought himself better than Lord Shiva in controlling the senses. In the Sanskrit here, the last phrase here, Nirjitatma Abhimanine, means he had this abhiman, this self-notion or conceit that he was like a sense controller. Nirjita Atma, I control the senses, good. And of course that his sense control was even more profound than Lord Shiva's. So Prabhupada just takes the opportunity to make a comment about pride here. This abhiman, because you have some accomplishment in bhakti. Of course, the accomplishment of Tritaketu is no small accomplishment. I mean, having Bhav and Prem is pretty good. It's a pretty good accomplishment. But Abhimanine, he's thinking of himself as such a powerful sense controller. And as a result of such Abhiman or pride, then he's committing a criticism or an offense here. So that is how Prabhupada's playing like different sides in this narration. So sometimes he's saying one thing in one purport, he's saying the opposite thing in another purport. So I think we would have to take this as a pedagogical for us, like a pedagogical tool for us, and less of a comment about these exalted persons and more as a pedagogical tool to instruct us. Otherwise, Prabhupada is saying in one place, he's glorifying Shiva, another place, he's criticizing he should not have done that. So then you're like, which one is it? Which one is it? You become a little confused. So here it must be accepted as a pedagogical tool for training sadhakas like ourselves. And in any case, so he's having this concept, Abhimanyu, that he's such a sense controller, due to that pride, he's committing this mistake. And so Prabhupada, quotes Trinadapi Sunichina. This is the instruction for all sadhakas. We should not busy ourselves with criticizing anyone forget devotees. Let's not even talk about criticizing. We shouldn't criticize anyone, actually. And the reason for this, if you've read this book, Obstacles in Bhakti, I've suggested it many times in the course of these sanghas. Obstacles in Bhakti by Vinod Bihari Baba and Varshana. Most excellent book. I read it at least once a year. And every time I read it, I feel utterly demoralized. Just like, I have no devotion whatsoever. But one of the, he talked about, he doesn't even talk about many obstacles in Bhakti, like tons. He just talks about a few main categories of obstacles. And the one that he spends quite a bit of time on, which is one that really impacts me every time I read that book, is Ninda, which means criticism. And he's quoting a lot from Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is Chaitanya Bhagavat. There are only two messages you'll get in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Chant holy name, that's one message. The other message is don't criticize anyone. That's literally the only two messages that comes through every single chapter of Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's actually a very powerful read, because when I first read the Chaitanya Bhagavat, yeah, it was very powerful because it was just like that. Chant Harinam and don't criticize. Next chapter. Chant Harinam and don't criticize. Next chapter. Chant Harinam. And what makes Chaitanya Bhagavat, I guess that message comes out in a sort of unique way, is that in Chaitanya Bhagavat, they speak about not performing ninda to anyone. It's not just like devotees, but like categorically, you should not do ninda. And that ninda is just a greatly sinful, irreligious activity. It should not be performed whatsoever, and that will impact your devotion. Insofar as we become accustomed to ninda of even ordinary things or ordinary conditioned souls, then our psyche becomes like programmed in that particular way. So it's only a matter of time before that psyche plays itself out in the company of Vaishnavas, and then you end up doing the mad elephant offense. And so Prabhupada is saying here, our practice should be Trinadapi Sunichena, Amanena Amanadena, giving respect to everybody and not expecting any in return. No ninda, absolutely no ninda. But what if someone is, worthy of criticism? Like, I'm not criticizing, I'm just telling the truth. I'm just pointing out what's actually going on. This is one of the main questions that you'll hear, or statements you'll hear of devotees justifying their ninda. In the case of being a leader, in some sense, I pity the fool who's the leader, because you have to actually engage in some of this stuff for the protection of your community. But if you're not a community leader, mind your business and drink some water. They've made a little one, Jamuna Bihari. Someone asked him some questions, some controversial, but like, what do you do about this sort of person in this sort of situation? And there was this video thing he made where it's like, I drink some water and mind my business. And I thought this is super excellent advice for bhaktas, sadhakas. Drink some water and mind your business. Don't do ninda. This is practical application of Trinadapi principle. Anyway, so because of his Nirjita Atma Abhimanine, because of that pride, he evoked the anger of Devi, Rushaha Devi, Drishtaya. She became angry at Tritaketu because of his shameless activity. And so now she's going to respond to him. Okay, we're going to do a few more verses here. Her response is to the point. So the goddess Parvati said, alas, has this upstart now received a post from which to punish shameless persons like us? He has been appointed ruler, carrier of the rod of punishment. Is he now the only master of everything? Obviously, these are rhetorical questions. Next verse. Alas, Lord Brahma, who has taken his birth from the lotus flower, does not know the principles of religion, nor do the great saints like Brigu and Narada, nor the four Kumaras headed by Sanat Kumar. Manu and Kapila have also forgotten the religious principles. I suppose it to be because of this that they have not tried to stop Lord Shiva from behaving improperly. In other words, how come they haven't said anything? Oh, they don't know the religious principles. Therefore, you have to come forward and instruct us, because these great personalities, they don't know. And therefore, they haven't instructed us. But obviously, this is tongue-in-cheek. This Ketu is the lowest of Kshatriyas, for he has impudently overridden Brahma and the other demigods by insulting Lord Shiva, upon whose feet they always meditate. Lord Shiva is personified religion and the spiritual master of the entire world, and therefore Chitraketu must be punished. So, in other words, now following the lead of persons like Brahma and others who meditate upon Lord Shiva's feet, they have not said anything to him. So instead of following their example, you've overridden them, you've transgressed their example and decided to criticize. So you need to be punished with respect. Next verse, this person is puffed up because of his achievements, thinking, I am the best. He does not deserve to approach the shelter of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet, which are worshipped by all saintly persons, for he is impudent, thinking himself greatly important. Another instruction about Trinadapi is coming here as well. He's having this consideration that I am very great. So in this way, he is committing the disrespect. Next verse. O imprudent one, my dear son, now take birth in a low, simple family of demons, so that you will not commit such an offense again toward exalted saintly persons in this world. So she curses him here. Ata papiyasam yonim asurim yahi primate. So, O impotent one, you go and take birth in the womb of the most simple of demonic persons. After making curses like this, Sri Vishwanath says she felt a little bad. She, in her own ruminations about it, actually this is not such a big deal. So she felt a little bad. So in the second line, Yateha Hatam Nakarta Putra Kilbisham. In the second verse, she's referred to him as son. Because at least the way Sri Vishwanath's comment reads, she felt a little bit bad that she gave him such heavy curse like this. So then she said, actually, you are my son, Putra, you are my son. And just as a loving mother punishes her son in order to rectify him and improve him, so in the same way, I am giving punishment to you in order to rectify and bring up. This is how Sri Vishwanath's comment is reading it for this. This way, by such punishment, you will not commit the activity again, and more importantly, you'll be weary of the mentality that leads to the commitment of such a heinous, transgression, like offending a great soul. Okay, Prabhupada's purport is a little long here, but this speaks about how Durga is the mother of everyone and how she's giving punishments in order to rectify the conditioned souls. He also, as mother and as servant of God, she is also a great Vaishnava. And so Prabhupada is bringing in this element here. To surrender to Krishna means to surrender to his devotees also, for no one can be a proper servant of Krishna unless he is a proper servant of a devotee. Chadiya Vaishnava Seva Nistara Paiji. Without serving a servant of Krishna, one cannot be elevated to be a servant of Krishna himself. Therefore, Mother Parvati spoke to Chitraketu exactly like a mother who said to her naughty child, my dear child, I am punishing you so that you don't do anything like this again. Okay, I think that's it. Sri Shukadev Goswami says, my dear King Parikshit, when Chitraketu was cursed by Parvati, he descended from his airplane, bowed before her with great humility, and pleased her completely. And now the next passage would be his response to the curse, which is very, very nice. His response to the curse is just a very beautiful section of the Bhagavatam. And of course, Lord Shiva's glorification is even more beautiful still. So we'll pause there. Anyone wants to say anything? Siddhari says, where does grace fall? What do you mean?
Well, I was thinking about this yesterday, that we're having discussion. You hear that for receiving the gift of bhakti, there is no pre-requirements. One doesn't have to have any qualification. It is, it's a free fall, causeless mercy. But at the same time, when we're preaching to college students. We're not going to the old age homes to preach to, people on the last leg. We're trying to go to schools and also which are, people are of high caliber versus, not going to South Side Chicago to youngsters there. So if the idea is that maybe I don't have proper faith in bhakti, that's why I'm looking for all these factors just to satisfy my mind. Because if bhakti is, independent and the grace is completely causeless, because you were talking about grace in earlier in your talk. That's why I was thinking about this question. That's number one, and I have another question after this.
So we are conditioned souls. So conditioned souls means we are Maya. So one of the definitions of Maya is one who measures everything, right? We make the measurement of everything. That is what it means to be in Maya. So in other words, we make material calculation. Okay, this is a young guy, he's a sweetie. And if they're old, they're useless. Out of the material calculation. For example, just like when I was on book distribution, whenever we would see young people walking in the airport, we'd like, oh, here comes a sweetie. We used to always say like that. And because, we could distribute books to them, it appeared to be easier or more than people who were like older and set in their ways. So that is just because we are in the Maya that we do this material calculation. But in Mahaprabhu Leela, there was no such calculation like this. Mahaprabhu was just walking and then chanting Hare Krishna, and everyone was getting the benefit. Same with Panchatattva. They're just moving hither and thither. It is interesting to say, though, having said that, Prabhupada has this interesting comment in Chaitanya Charitamrita that the reason Mahaprabhu left Navadvip is because there were all a bunch of dry scholars over there, enmeshed in argumentation. And so to put the seed of bhakti there would have bore no fruit. So he left Navadvip in order to travel in South India and start his preaching there where people were more, quote unquote, favorable. So that's just kind of an interesting comment there. Mahaprabhu, of course, himself, took sannyas, seeing the way that people were in Navadvip. But these people, they'll just keep on criticizing because they're lost in argumentation. So let me take sannyas, at least that way they'll bow down out of respect for the culture. And in bowing down, they may be benefited. So there is a sense of, what is that verse from Bhagavad Gita? Yesham Tantakatam Papam Jananam Punya Karmana. What's the next line? Jananam Punya Karmana Nirdvanda Moha Nirmukta. Nirdvanda Moha Nirmukta. Then the last line I forgot. So anyway, when people's sins have come to an end, Yesham Tantakatam Papam, and they have developed a piety, then that time they become free from dualities. Bhajante mam drida vrataha, and then their bhajan becomes drida. So that statement is made in Gita. So it's like, well, do they have to become free from sins then? Well, how does that work? So the way Srila Baladeva Vibhushana comments on that, as well as Sri Vishnu, but Sri Baladeva Vibhushana's commentary even more so, is that when there's intense tamagun, they're very hard to be receptive to anything. That is the nature of tamas. Just like if you're in deep sleep, you can't hear anything. So it's hard to be receptive to anything when there's deep tamagun. So what happens is by sadhu sangha, you get a little bit of, I forget how I have to go and look at the commentary. But the sense is that by sadhu sangha, when some of your sin is eradicated, then you become a little bit more situated in goodness, then you become more receptive in sattva-guna to the mercy that sadhus are given. And then by that mercy, all your anarthas get destroyed. Nirdvanda moha nirmukta, and then you become strongly fixed in bhakti. So anyway, my answer in essence is that because we're in Maya, we make material calculation. So that's natural, that's par for the course. If we become exalted and we have genuine taste for bhakti, then those particulars may not factor in for us. Wherever I go, I'll do bhakti, and there can be influence in those particular spaces. But having qualified that, I also was making this other angle that there does seem to be something to the sense that, a certain type of grace to help people become receptive. Because if you're too entrenched in tamas and rajas, then it makes receptivity a little bit challenging. So there's something to be said about that thinking. Okay, I don't know if they can be receptive. But Vaishnavas are also supposed to have the power to, depending on their power, to make people receptive. Young, old. Like I see Raghunath. If you look Raghunath, yogi, the demographic of people he preaches to, they're quite older. Most of them are much older. Now, of course, they're like kind of like white women, a lot of them, but a lot of them are like, they're older as they become receptive somehow because of how he does things. So just because you're older doesn't mean you can't receive. Or now the ghetto one, that's one that has been yet to be explored. I don't know if Varaha Maharaj. So Varaha Maharaj, whenever I meet him, he always asks me, he says, so you going to preach in the Black communities? He always asks me that question whenever I see him. And I'm like, well, he said, you have to go to preach in the Black communities. They're not going to listen to anybody else. They're only going to listen to someone that looks like them. So you got to go and preach in the Black communities. I'm like, I'm just not interested in being shot. Like, I don't know, something about not being shot that's very appealing to me. And so that's like unexplored territory. So we'll see.
I guess I'm not satisfied yet because I don't see any conclusive, presentation there. Like one side you're saying that there is no qualification, then by the end you already turn the tables around, and you're the other side to like Prabhupada, something of this and something of that. He made a mistake. He did not make a mistake. I guess it's meant to be instructive.
What could be said? Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his analysis in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita, the fifth rainfall, he says those who have prema bhakti, they have unlimited power. So in any place they can spread Krishna consciousness. Like Prabhupada's Leela has demonstrated that. He says those who are bhav bhaktas, then for sadhakas, they can bring their bhakti up to the state of ruchi, like immediately. And from there, very shortly, they can bring them to bhav bhakti. And he says, yeah, that's for the sadhakas. And for the non-devotees, he says that they can give ruchi to them quite quickly. That is their power. He says for the sadhakas and rag marg or vaidhi marg, doesn't matter. He says they have enough power to give faith only, shraddha. That is their power. They can give the faith. Now, why? So your question, well, why they seem to only give faith in this location and not in the other location? So that is beyond our ability to answer, because as this verse is coming in the description of Vrindavan, 20th chapter of the 10th canto, there's this one verse that says that just as the mountains, the water comes down from the mountains and sometimes doesn't come. I forget the exact description. So in this way, sadhus are sometimes giving mercy and sometimes not giving mercy. And their criteria is something internal. In other words, we don't know what is motivating them this way or that way because it's outside the reach of material criteria. This verse is also quoted by Sri Vishwanath in the first canto, chapter 5, verse 23, when Narada Muni is starting to tell his life story. And he says that the Bhaktivedantas, they were Tulya Dharshina, they saw with equal vision. So because they saw with equal vision, the good qualities of Narada cannot be a motivation for them giving mercy. So Sri Vishwanath takes up this argument there. So there he says that, so when they gave mercy the first time, it had nothing to do with his good qualities. But then he manifested good qualities by that first mercy. And then seeing his good qualities that came by the first mercy, they gave further mercy. But then he quotes this verse from the 10th canto, chapter 20, that sometimes sadhus give mercy, sometimes they don't. And their criteria is something internal, like they're moved to or not moved to, but it's not because of what's happening externally, it's happening internally. So for conditioned souls who are in fact moved by external criteria, that's how we end up selecting. But if you're dealing with great exalted Vaishnavas, they don't have those sort of criteria. So why don't they preach in those areas? Who can say? They're moved this way or that way by factors that aren't based on empirical circumstances as far as the Bhagavatam is concerned. So who can say?
Can we say people who are more open to hearing, they receive more mercy. Like people when they're young, they're in that mood of education, they want to learn, so that's why, like they're more receptive to speaking. As you become older, you have more responsibilities. There is a lesser chance for them to hear from the sadhu, and in that sense, receive the mercy. Because what's receiving mercy from sadhu? It's not that he's gonna come and slap you and you got the mercy and that he could empower going forward.
Well, Abhiram Thakur, he was able to do
Yeah,
that.
he was using the whip. We don't have such examples yet in our movement. It'd be cool to have that too.
So only problem there is that you cannot say that their receptiveness to hearing is the cause of their receiving mercy. Because that means anytime anyone's receptive to hearing, then they will be spoken to, because that's the direct cause. But it is saying that even if people are receptive, that doesn't mean they hear about bhakti from Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas may speak to them, may not speak to them. So you cannot say that as the invariable cause of their receiving mercy.
Well, that's the cause. That's the reason why the Vaishnavas spend time preaching that class of people, because there's a more opportunity there that they will hear, versus if you were to go and speak to stones, even though there'll be souls inside the stone, because they're not going to hear, there's no point really to speak to the stone.
Yeah, I don't think you can say, when you're dealing with Vaishnavas who make material calculations because of Buddhism, you can say like this. When you're dealing with Vaishnavas who aren't on the Maya platform, you can't say. Yadricha has the answer. Somehow they spoke to this fellow and the fellow got the mercy. Well, if you're thinking only in terms of like empirical prowess, then you can say like this, whatever you say. But these other Vaishnavas like Abhiram Thakur with the whip, they can come and give, Krishna consciousness to the tiger.
Well, I'm also speaking in terms of what we are seeing in the movement, that most people, when they join Krishna conscious movement, they are comparatively young. They're not joining fast. Like most of them are joining the age of like say 18 to like 30.
Okay.
So I'm seeing that statistic. It seems like in that age group there is more mercy falling, whereas other age groups are not getting so much mercy. Why is that the case? And I'm just getting from your presentation that it's that at that period it seems they're more open to hearing because they're not so much covered by this and that.
And be open to hearing, but I would say to that is because devotees who are generally influenced by empirical factors, that's the groups that they're reaching out to. And some of those groups are reciprocating by, few here and they join. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to like say it in a more aggressive way, like, well, a lot of devotees were in Maya. I can say it like that. And therefore we make material estimations, and therefore we preach to certain demographics. And it makes sense that the demographics we preach to or reach out to, some of them end up converting to Krishna consciousness. So that's how that's working on a global institutional level.
Well, also at a personal level, it means, bringing it home that for me to receive more mercy, what are the things I need to work on? And that I'm bringing it home that it means I have to be more open to hearing from sadhu and not be closed-minded. And that's why one should endeavor to be more of sattva, so that one is able to see what food is coming. That's being compared to being in tamas, where I ignore the gift which has been given to me.
Sure. So with that, I again point you to 1 Canto chapter 5, verse 23, Sri Vishwanath's commentary. The initial receptivity is outside of our power that was gifted. And seeing that the gift was not squandered, you develop some good qualities like sattva, like greater receptivity, et cetera, et cetera. And so then sadhus become more inclined because of that not squandering of the first gift, so to speak. And this is how Sri Vishwanath tries to deal with this sort of theological, it becomes like a theological dilemma. Because you want to keep bhakti independent on the one hand, so you can't make material factors causes of bhakti coming into someone's life. So this is how they're trying to keep it theologically consistent.
Well, I'll check it out. 1523. Thank you.
Mukunda has something. It says, I think, Gal has something. Harishan has something. Mukunda G.
Hare Krishna. Sorry. Yeah. So just on this topic of offenses and not criticizing anyone, I was just curious. I mean, maybe this is more from a personal point of view, but like, for when we observe from a third party point of view, somebody performs something that looks like an offense towards a devotee, and then that leads to that devotee, it's externally an offense, but we're also saying that it may be some action that was set up by the Lord to deepen that devotee's practice. So if I were the person that were the catalyst for that devotee, you know, for that seeming offense, basically, am I to incur the karma from making a devotee go deeper in their bhakti? Or do you understand what I'm saying? Like, or was I just being directed by the Lord to, you know, make this devotee go deeper, and then I actually don't incur any like bad reaction?
Okay, my mind is going to the beginning of the third canto with Vidura and Duryodhana. You know the whole scene where Vidura tells Dhritarashtra, like, hey, your son's going to be the cause of the destruction of the whole Kuru race. You should arrest him. And he said that within Duryodhana's hearing. So Duryodhana becomes upset and he banishes Vidura. He said, leave, I'll allow you to leave with only your life, but you must leave immediately. And Prabhupada makes comment there that Vidura could see that both Mahamaya and Yogamaya were acting simultaneously. Mahamaya was acting on Duryodhana to make him, aggressive and offensive. And Vidura was also saying, like, okay, Yogamaya is here giving me opportunity to be free from the contamination of political affairs and go on pilgrimage, purify myself, and become immersed in Krishna consciousness. So he was hurt. It says there that Duryodhana's words actually hurt Vidura's heart. But then he also saw that this is Krishna's mercy giving me opportunity. So God, it seems, can accomplish many activities simultaneously. So if you become the catalyst of a devotee going deeper, that may be due to that devotee's own surrender to God, less to do with your being like this instrument of divine grace in their life.
Yeah.
And as a result, you get the result of your foolish activities, as Duryodhana got the result of his offense to Vidura. And that devotee gets the result of his surrender, which you may have been somehow some sort of stimulus for it, udipan for. But ultimately, it's his surrender to Krishna and his relationship. So everyone gets the fruit of their own activity. And otherwise, this thing comes up also for Rupa Goswami and BRS, where suppose you preach to a devotee or some non-devotee, they become devotee because of you. So do you get the credit of their devotional service? They're doing so much bhakti. Do you get the credit of their devotional service? No, you get the credit of your own devotional service, and they get the credit of their devotional service. Everyone gets the fruit of their own actions.
Yeah. Sorry, this guy's. Yeah, that's a good example, though. I like that Duryodhana Vidura example. Thank you.
Okay, Mother Girl, you got something, and Harisham's got a reflection.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, two quick things. One is this calcified cocoon, right, which can, be the material devotional success of a devotee. I don't think I caught how that can like stunt your growth. That if you're a great speaker, for example, one who gives great classes, or I don't know, you're able to do 108 rounds a day. I don't know.
The standard of devotional service is Bhav Bhakti. That is the standard. That standard has nothing to do with our own ability. If we come to that standard, it's solely by the grace of sadhus and of Bhagavan himself. So fruit of jivas as we are, we need something to do. We want to feel like something's within our power, within our control. So we'll tend to substitute the real standard of Krishna consciousness with things that we could do in order to achieve such a standard, like becoming learned. That's something I can do. I can study and become learned, become a very good pujari dresser, and become a great leader in the temple or something. So all these things become like lower, like egos. They're like different egos, basically, or personas that we may embrace to give us a sense of identity in the community, a sense of course, purpose, and a sense of something to do. And this is all fine and dandy. It can help, that can help as a container until we make the necessary progress needed to actually get the real standard of Christian consciousness, which is Bhakti Bhakti. So in order to come to that standard, sometimes our ego personas, the ones that we adopt, they get in the way of that further pursuit. You become more fixated with being the leader of a temple than being a Bhakta. You become more concerned with being a scholar that can give nice classes than being a Bhakta. You become more concerned with being a great cook that everyone likes than being a Bhakta. You know, everything else becomes important than the actual goal of Krishna consciousness. And that happens almost to everyone inevitably, just because that's the way that ego traps us in our conditioned life. And so Krishna, in order to help us move further, may have to create a situation that, you know, throws us into utter humility, because the combination of humility and bhakti is what allows bhakti to really flourish and grow. So as long as we're feeling this sort of deep security and our wealth and our beauty and our position, right? Then we'll not be able to feelingly call out to Krishna. So Krishna may make some situation to break those ego, you know, cocoons, so to speak. So, you know, and the experience of the breaking of an ego cocoon is you feel humiliated, basically. You feel humble. And that humility is like the dirt or the soil. It's like a darkness. It feels uncomfortable. And in that humility, bhakti is able to exalt. It's able to grow. So in this way, I'm giving understanding.
So I wonder if, put another way, if I understood correctly, is that a person may become more focused on their upadis.
Yes. Yeah,
and
including devotional upadis. That's what we're adding to. Right.
Yeah. It's the devotional upadis I'm referring to.
Right.
And become less focused on a genuine service mood.
Yeah, genuine service mode, but also I would say become less focused on the sadhya. The sadhya is bhav bhakti, prem bhakti. That is the sadhya of Christian consciousness.
But isn't that service?
Yeah, so just however you want to say, I like to use this word though. Sadhya bhakti, bhav. That is the whole purpose of Christian conscious sadhana. Kriti sadhya bhavat sadhya bhava sa sadhana vida. So the sadhya just comes somehow out of the consciousness, and it becomes about how you're performing in the psychophysical dimension. So Krishna may need to help out with that.
So you prefer this word sadhya because, you know, it gets less confused with like the mechanics.
Yeah, well, yeah, because if you say seva, well, I'm doing seva. I'm a temple president. I'm giving a class.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. And just one thing I just missed when you were saying about the King Chitraketu criticizing, you know, Lord Shiva thing. And who was it who was smiling? Was it Shukadeva Goswami, or who was that?
It was Shiva, Lord Shiva.
Well, Shiva was smiling at Lord Chitraketu's quote unquote criticism.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's because he could understand his purpose. And so he just,
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just a tiny bit surprised that, you know, he didn't rein Parvati in, you know, since he knew what was, you know, King Chitraketu's mind.
Yeah. Sri Vishwanath does offer a comment I forgot to mention. Now you're bringing it up. He does offer a comment that it wasn't that Shiva knew and his followers knew, but Parvati didn't know. She also could understand the intention, but she still felt it inappropriate. And so she's like, you're not getting away with this. And of course, this is also inspired by Bhagavan, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. She couldn't let him set that bad example, kind of thing.
she's like, no, you're not getting away with this. Like, I understand your purpose, but you're out of line.
Right, right. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, Hari Sham, you have some comments and reflection if you're still here. This one.
Yeah, I'm still here. I just had to unmute for a second. Yeah, just a quick reflection on this point you're making about how the calcified cocoon, Kadambakana Swami in his interview with Nam Ras was talking about how he got shot. And then he was explaining how because he was the temple president of Vrindavan, and then that's when the whole like Rasik Bhakta controversy was going on. So he was the one driving like reports to the GBC about, different senior devotees. He mentioned like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and others who were going to Narayan Maharaj. And so he felt that actually when he got shot, it was Krishna telling him, now return to being a mouse, because he'd become sort of a big man in ISKCON. He was temple president of Vrindavan. He was investigating his senior god brothers and, senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada, challenging them on their stance. And, and so he took it as Krishna saying, okay, now again, work on being humble. And I was really touched by that story. And then when you were talking about this whole episode, and then directly in response to Mother Gail's question about sometimes we may get caught up with our identity in the institution and forget the sadhya, which is bhav bhakti, then Krishna might do something to instigate that revival of our devotional consciousness. And then Maharaj, in that response to that story, he then started explaining how he sees ISKCON as like a 3-layered sort of ocean where the surface is the institution, which is what most people interact with, and that's where they find their identity in the very beginning. Like, I'm a brahmachari, I'm a this, I'm a cook, I'm a that. These are my responsibilities. But then the second layer of that ocean is the process of hearing and chanting, which is where we want to be situated. And then at the very bottom of that ocean are the jewels of prema bhakti that are, a few souls that are really able to go deep. So the whole point is to start at the surface, but constantly aspire to go deeper. And sometimes if we just stay stuck on the surface, then Krishna might do something to force us to go deeper. And so I really appreciate your framing of the whole Chitraketu experience as glorious, that maybe it was glorious that he got cursed. And it's so funny too, because Kadambakana Maharaj in that interview directly mentioned how one senior devotee who was guiding him at the very beginning of his Krishna consciousness was caught doing something illicit with the woman in the kitchen, And so because of that, they made him the general manager for the restaurant. And it was funny because you said that directly. You said, why is that glorious if someone's caught breaking a regulated principle? No, why is that a fall down? Maybe it's glorious. Maybe this is what's going to instigate this devotee to go to the next stage in his Krishna consciousness. So very interesting reframing of how we generally tend to view these things as, oh my God, and all of this, which probably comes from some sense of insecurity in our own self. Maybe, I think Satyananda Babaji said it once that we probably want to enjoy those things ourselves. We're not able to do it. So if someone else does, then we poo-poo them, because we ourselves have the desires for these things, but we're like trying to hold back, anyways. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. That's a great comment and reframing what I was saying. Yeah, it's just another way of looking at success. But this way of looking at success doesn't feel good. So we tend to, I shared this quote yesterday in our men's Sangha. I'm going to share it here also. From Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward. I used to like recommending this book to devotees. I think I still probably will recommend it sometimes. I didn't find it as inspiring my second time around as I did the first time around. But he does have some really great, like, golden statements in this book. And one of them is this, which I was reading yesterday, that none of us, this is the quote, none of us go into our spiritual maturity completely of our own accord or by a totally free choice. We are led by mystery, which religious people rightly call grace. This is really a great quote, honestly. None of us go into our own spiritual maturity completely of our own accord or by a totally free choice. Like, if you were given the choice, become a Vitrasura, go to hell and become a Vitrasura, who would make that choice? Probably no one would make that choice. And so Krishna has to make arrangements for us. We are led by mystery, right? Parvati suddenly getting upset when everyone else is peaceful and go to hell, become a demon. We are led by mystery, which religious people rightly call grace. So I think it's a great quote. And yeah, so success looks different in this case. Okay, that's all in the chat box, I think. Anyone else wants to say anything before we go?
Hey, Jai.
Yeah, what's up?
Haribo.
Hey, are you in town? I think I saw you yesterday.
I am. I saw you in the back of the room, but I had Garanga Prabhu. I was following him around on some issues with Brooklyn and things like that. So I had to race out with him after.
Okay.
And Shamasundari had me running to REI at 100-degree temperature to exchange a sweater for Rohini. So in between that, I was running there. But no, just a reflection. I was thinking about, you were speaking on chastity. Yeah. Thank you. Harisham is reminding me of my upadi. No, just when Tamal was visiting with us, he was sharing a lot from Ramayan, and we were talking about the situation with Sita at the very end and how she goes through the 2 tests to prove her chastity in Lanka, and yet after she returns, Ram hears this washerman speak of Sita and how Ram took her back in, and I'm just thinking to myself of the degree of chastity that existed at this time, and having great respect for that, because having grown up in the West where that was, I mean, granted, I'm older, so there was a higher degree of that then than today for sure. But just thinking of how sad the story of Sita and Ram was, because as Tamal said, and I think it took place it was a Treta Yuga when people were living very long, that they were in their 30s when he sent her to the forest with Lakshman, and then he lives 11,000 years apart from her in great sadness, and how each night he would come back and sleep on the floor and eat berries and be in sadness, all because of the inability to prove to the people her chastity. And now when you're giving this reflection, I'm thinking, wow, how degraded our society really has become. My brother and I were last night talking. He just came back from a party in Montauk. A friend has this fancy yacht and 35 people there. And one of the guests was Cuba Gooding, who stayed for the night. And he told me how he was groping all the women. And I'm thinking, this is an Oscar-winning actor who should be theoretically a role model. And he's living and leading and exemplifying just degradation to the umpteenth level. So just reflecting on what chastity was then and where we are today and how further degraded we become. And then just last thing I wanted to suggest was the Namras interview was phenomenal. If anyone hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. Kanambakana Maharaj gave such moving comments in so many directions that if you haven't watched it, watch it. And you mentioned Richard Rohr. There was also a very nice talk that I watched that Padmanabhana Swami shared. You can see it on his Facebook page. So if any of the members haven't seen it, highly recommend watching it. So anyway, thank you again. I just sorry to interrupt. I'll be here still next week, so maybe you and I can grab a little bite at Divya's together and see each other. Okay. If not, I know I'll see you in Kali soon.
Okay. Fantastic.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, fam, we'll pause for here today then. Hariam Tat Sat. Oh, it's already 9:42. Dang. Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Go Permanenti. Hari Hari Bo. Thank you all very much.